So this is what we call the afterburn. All right, so if you have a comment or question, you can come on up to the mic over here. Online, we've got our Shamish team back there. They'll be taking note of any comments or questions. And so you're certainly welcome for that. All right, so when we talked about the verse 11 fivefold, guys, in chapter 4, did you see today, was I acting like an apostle today? No. Was I acting like a shepherd today? No. Was I acting like an evangelist today? No. Was I acting like a teacher today? Did I really tell you anything you didn't know? No. Was I acting like a prophet today? Yes. You see, that's the role. You could look at the function and then understand that's what the person, so it's not like a person is a prophet and that's all they are, or a teacher and that's all they are, okay? It's the role that they're filling at that moment. Yes, I taught you a few things maybe along the way in here, some of the words you maybe didn't understand correctly and those kind of things, but mostly it was in the role of wake up, don't sleep, you know, let's get to this thing, right? Let's not play anymore. Let's get serious about it. All right, we're going to begin here with Mr. Bishop.
Hello, Rabbi. Thank you. Thank you so much. This period this teaching was so strong for me because of some of the things that have been happening in my own life in this period of time, and leading into Sukkot and Yom Kippur and all this, where I individually have had times when maybe I had self-doubt about my walk, or something would come up, even with a conversation with other people, and it just seemed as though the question comes up, well, what do I do to get out of this? And, you know, this self-talk and what voice am I listening to, those sorts of things. So it was so interesting that just even yesterday, we were having lunch with a friend of my wife's that had come up from Atlanta, and we had a good 2 hours of time that we could take at the restaurant. And she's walking, not in this particular assembly, but our conversations were very, very parallel. And one of the things that came up was the same reiteration of how do you work your way out of. And so the thought occurred to me as we were learning and listening to your lesson, so how much what Paul is saying here in Ephesians, where if you hear it the way part of the way you taught it, it's a linear flow. You know, is Paul saying, you know, beware of this, beware of this, beware of talking to people, and then come and wake up, and you will see the light, and that sort of thing, and then stay on the path. And that, I think, is so amazing about what this is, because it also, this can happen in a circular period of time over just a matter of a few weeks. You know, you've seen a light, you have this walk, you feel very comfortable, and all of a sudden you go into either a trial or you're beginning to self-doubt, and then you ask yourself, well, how did I get here? Right. And what do I do to get out of this? Right. And I think it's just incredible to look at this and put it in our life today, because I think one of the key verses is the verse 13, all matters. Now my translation says being convicted or manifested by the light, for whoever is for whatever is manifested is light. That is a that's a reoccurring manifestation. I think that you're teaching us, and it's beginning to hit my heart as, am I correct to think that if I'm in a situation of doubting, what I need to do is to go back and retrace my footsteps, find out how I got where I am. Go to the Word and read something in the Word. Remember a conversation that I had with somebody, or just trust and say, I know you're not going to leave me. What have I done, or
right.
what can I do?
Right.
And it's so many times have happened to me, this feeling of a complete personal understanding just comes to me and said, of course, I am here, I will never leave you. Or, you get to beginning to understand and trust obedience, that if you go through these things, you recognize more quickly when you're beginning to get off into a side ditch and you can get back on. Am I seeing this right? Does that fit together?
No, that does. It does. Look,
okay.
Couple of things. One, you're not going to find too many teachers, unfortunately, right? And this is not me bragging on me, that will give you context in the full way. In other words, you could read chapters in Leviticus where there's like a shotgunning, don't do this, don't do that, et cetera, right? And so there's not a theme necessarily that's playing through. When you read a letter, and we call it the book of Ephesians, not a book, it's a letter. It's a letter to the Ephesian congregation. And this particular letter is not addressing a bunch of things. Okay, you see sometimes in the Corinthians and some other places where he's addressing, this is going on, handle it this way, this is going on, handle it that way. This has a theme through the whole thing of a point that the letter is trying to make. And so you need to, as you're reading, and mostly when you go to any of these other places or you watch anything that the mainstream churches are putting out, they're going to take one little piece in one verse, okay? And then they're going to they may just take verse 2 and say, and walk in love as Messiah also loved us. And then make a whole sermon not understanding, well, what was the point of why he said it here in this letter? It's just not a random thought. He had a very specific aspect of what that looks like that he was addressing in the context of where you are now. Remember where you were, which is kind of what you were also talking about, that you were reminded, like looking back, how did I get here? Jim Rohn, one of the grandfathers of personal development and motivational training, said, you are absolutely going to arrive at your destiny. But what destiny that will be depends on what decisions you make. In other words, you're always headed somewhere, and you will get there. But if you're not paying any attention to what you've been doing, you may actually end up being surprised when you get there. Not realizing that every decision you make. Look, you are right now where every choice you have made up to this moment has brought you. You're exactly at that spot. Don't blame everything else that's happened around you. You're still exactly, because you could have made different choices when things happened to you. Okay? You are where your choices have led you, which means that if you don't like where you are, because you were dead in trespasses, now you want to walk in light and all this other stuff, all you need to do is make different choices, and you'll end up in a different place several years from now, because it has a little bit of a lag period to it, okay? But it's all those decisions lead you to something. Okay? You are in a moving vehicle that's going somewhere. You may not have ever left your neighborhood your whole life, but you're in a moving vehicle headed somewhere in the bigger picture. And so if that's headed towards the kingdom, great, you'll end up in the kingdom. If it's not, you'll end up wherever that is, that's not the kingdom. But you are doing things. So it's good, as Ken was pointing out, to look back and say, okay, I'm here where I am now. What maybe led up to this? What did I do? What choices did I make? How did I get here? And that's also from a positive point of view, because sometimes things will go in a good way. You need to go back and realize, what did I do that brought the positives? I hear that a lot of times during prayer time, where somebody would get up and say, some really great things happen, and I'm realizing they're happening because, and then they look and see what were the decisions, obedience, submission, trusting the process, whatever it was, that got them the result. So it's that awareness of cause and effect, which is all throughout Scripture, right? You will reap what you sow. Well, what does that mean? It's like you sow, which means you do things, and that leads to a result. You reap. And so he's simply trying to give us an understanding that, yes, you need to know where you are now. That's great. But remember, the reason you're where you are now is because you were dead, and Yeshua gave you that drawing out in Ephesians chapter 2, and then you chose to now have covenant and have promises and all kinds of a future, but you can also get derailed by empty words and partaking with those that are sons of disobedience. See, that's the flow of this whole thing leading into chapter 5. And so it's a full context thing, which is why you have to have 10, 20 parts to a teaching. Because some people don't like that we do so many parts. Well, what, you want to spoon feed everything? Do you only eat at McDonald's and fast food, or do you actually sit down and eat a real meal sometimes? Because a real meal isn't going to take only 5 minutes, you get it and you just swallow it down in 4 bites. Okay? Because you can't live on that. Sometimes you have to slow down and take the time to make and eat a real meal. Well, that's the same thing that we're talking about here. He's saying, look, you need to understand how we got here, what the process is, and how to maintain now that you're in light and not in darkness, because you were dead and now you're not. But guess what? You can choose to be dead anytime you want. Because we're not going into that foolishness of once saved, always saved. That just got me all kinds of hates on there, okay? Because that's foolishness. Those are empty words. That is complete empty words. You know what I'm talking about? Listen to the Are You Saved teaching. Okay, that's one of the definitions of empty words, the whole once saved, always saved. Because that derails all of the doing that's necessary. It undermines the whole plan. So it's empty. And so you have to be aware of these things. And, we use empty words on ourselves. We say, well, he knows my heart. Those are empty words to justify being disobedient. You never say that when you're being obedient. You only say that when you know you're being disobedient. And somehow, I don't know how that even makes sense, because he knows your heart, and he knows that your heart was to do what you wanted to do. So I don't know why you think that that helps anyway. Because if your heart was right, you wouldn't do it. Bottom line, okay? So let's just, please let's make sure we're embracing this, because I think it's very important. Thank you, Ken, for saying how sometimes when you go and you examine, you look, you can finally say, oh, I get it. Because sometimes if you can slow down enough and get some perspective on your own life, you can see what happened, what your choices were, and what the result was. And when they were good, you can continue doing them. When they were bad, you can stop doing them. And so you can learn.
This morning I was flipping through the scriptures, and you started out in Ephesians 4:11 with your teaching today.
Yep.
The fivefold ministry. And the last verse in Hebrews says, pray for your leaders. And what I thought of was some people misunderstand greatly Matthew 23. Don't call rabbi, don't call father, don't call leaders. And what hit me is Matthew 23 is greatly misunderstood, because almost every book in the Bible shows leadership.
Right.
So just one of those for what it's worth things.
No, I appreciate that.
Right.
I appreciate that. Look, and I did a teaching called, I keep forgetting the name of it, Don't Be Called Rabbi, Call Nobody Rabbi, something like that it's called, right? And in that I explained the whole Matthew 23 section, and you need to go listen to that. It's an in focus. It's easy to find on our YouTube channel. But what I will say, that Rabbi Tom, you just inspired me when you mentioned the word fivefold. I think I'm going to call it 5 roles, the 5 roles of ministry, as opposed to fivefold ministry. Okay, I don't know what fivefold means. Okay, but it's the 5 roles, R-O-L-E-S, roles of ministry. Okay, and so we'll just kind of maybe refer to it that way in the future. All right, now we'll go to Janet.
Rabbi, thank you. And thank you for playing all those roles today. Because I know that even as a prophet, when you're a lot of times as a prophet teaching us and instructing us and motivating us, at the same time, I do see the love of the shepherd. I think we all can see that.
Well, listen, the 57 hours a week of counseling I do is all shepherding. I'm just saying, okay? And if you've not counseled, you don't know and experience that caring that comes from myself and the other leaders that when we counsel you. But that counseling is all shepherding. Okay? There's no teaching necessarily going on or profiting going on. It's shepherding going on. All right? And so I do a lot of shepherding. It's not my comfort zone. I mean, people think I do a fairly good job, whatever, but it's not my favorite role to play because it's not comfortable for me as much as getting up here and just letting it fly. Okay, that's more congruent with what I do. But I also understand and accept that he has blessed me with insight when I shepherd. The zone meetings is part teaching, part prophet, part shepherding. It depends on what the people ask, you know? All right, Janet.
Thank you, Rabbi. And I wanted to go to verse 15 when it says, "See then that you walk exactly, not as unwise but as wise." And you started talking about how we need to be careful when it says exactly that you will walk in the fear of Yahweh. And so one of the teachings that I keep in my car is the fear of Yahweh, because I need to hear it. You know, and the other one is the name of I forgot what.
No other name.
No other name. Yes. But I started thinking about that because yesterday I did something that was dishonoring to the Father, and I went back and I tried to undo what I did, I guess, but I didn't do it with the right fear. I kind of downplayed it, and when you were teaching today, I started thinking the fear of Yahweh. You know, I didn't have the proper awe and respect to go through the repentance process, and I started doing that while you were teaching, and I got really convicted. And I started to think, you know, fear of Yahweh, that fear is what keeps us humble, so that we can really approach the King as who he is. And I learned that lesson myself. So I really appreciate you being so I don't even know what the word. You're so filled with integrity that you really encourage us to elevate our walk to that high standard that he has for us, and not just doing it mindlessly, halfly asleep, but really with the full intention with our full hearts. So I appreciate that, Rabbi, very much.
Amen. Amen.
And
hold on. Let me say this. So part of what she said was that she'd had a moment where she had done something, okay? What's important is that, let's go back to what I've taught you about owning it and then fixing it and then letting it go, right? Owning it means really to own it. I mean, and so she said she didn't quite own it like she should have. She was kind of hedging it a little bit and that kind of thing. And everybody should know what that feels like. Look, I had a moment the other day in a public place at a restaurant where I was losing my patience, and I got very impatient with somebody, a family member who was in line. But as soon as I saw myself behaving that way, I owned it. It didn't feel like, I mean, I still wanted to make excuses and justify that they were making me frustrated, whoever it was, but it wasn't. And I said, no, even though I was making a little bit of a scene, I said, this is me, I'm having the problem, I need to walk away, it's not your fault. And that didn't fix everything immediately, because obviously I still was losing my temper and losing my patience, but at least I was sitting there making myself not spin or hedge or justify. I said, this is all me, not anything you're doing or anybody else is doing. This is my inability to handle with patience whatever was happening. And that, I know, thinking about it, how hard because I was trying to be aware of myself going through it and how hard it was not to justify in some ways, but they were making me upset. They were doing something and making me impatient. I wanted to point the finger. That's our human nature. Not to fully embrace that it's not them. And so I just kept making sure the words kept coming out of my mouth. This is all about me. It's my fault. It's not about you. I'm sorry I'm making a scene. I'm frustrated. I need to extract myself out, but it's not you. Didn't make the person necessarily feel perfect about everything, but at least I was making the effort, right, to do what I could at that moment as I'm trying to learn how to own. And then when we sat down to eat, I said, I apologize as best I could, and I made sure again to reiterate that this is all me. It was my inability to handle something, because those of you who know me, I have anger and patience problems from time to time. I mean, I certainly own that that's my biggest challenge, but I wanted to convey to the person, this is not, I apologize, I'm sorry I made a scene in front of people, embarrassed you, whatever it was, this is all me, okay? The old me going back however far, would have tried to say, yeah, but you know, if you hadn't done this, I wouldn't have lost my temper. If you hadn't done this, I wouldn't have been impatient. No, I pointed 0 fingers, okay? Now, I'm proud of it only because I know what a struggle it was to do that. Because I'm trying to watch and observe, as I've taught you to, as I do things, as you should do for yourselves. And be aware of that inner struggle, that ego and pride to fully own something. See, the ego and pride doesn't want to fully own. It wants to attribute some of that or offload as much as they can to something else. Okay, so, you know, was the situation perfect? Far from it. But I tried to do my part. I'm encouraging just using the example, you know, sort of benign example, but it wasn't, you know, it was still in a public place and it was a scene. And some of you don't like to have public place scenes. I know most people don't. Look, the one thing about me that's good, if not anything, is that, even if it's bad, is that I'm the same in public as I am on the mic anywhere else. So I'm going to be the same wherever. Now, that's not necessarily good when it makes a scene, okay? So I have to learn to grow and mature in those patience areas, all right? And so you'll see, look, we used to, when we had Oneg, I used to always go last because I don't have, at this point, the ability to stand in lines. I'd rather go last, and if there's no food left, there's no food left. I'll sit and talk and do something else, but to stand in a line, which is what was happening at the restaurant, really is something I have not, with my ADD or whatever it is, I can't do that. And so the fact that I didn't manage it, I took the blame though. I wasn't gonna blame it on ADD, I wasn't gonna blame it on anything else. I should have recognized and just quietly walked away, let whatever was happening finish out, but I lost my temper first, okay? And so I want to encourage Janet, who recognized in herself the same thing. She didn't quite fully own it at first, and there was a little bit of, that's good that you're observing that. So now you can do a better job in the future, right? You have to have that self-awareness to grow. I'm sure all of you can relate to what I've said. On some aspect in your life where things that keep going on that you keep struggling with, you're still not owning it like you should. And you're never going to fix it in a full way till you own it fully. Because as long as you think somebody else has a part in it, then you can't really fix it. You can only fix it partially. But until you recognize that you have full control over how you respond, so I now know that when I'm in a situation like that, I can just say, here's the credit card, order what you want, I'm going over here. And I'm not creating any kind of a scene, okay? Because the person, by the way, did nothing wrong. I mean, nothing. So, I mean, even if I wanted to point a finger, there was nothing wrong. It was just my, you know, I'm sitting there going, okay? Which had nothing, they were doing everything that was normally inappropriate. Anybody ever do that? People around you doing everything, actually things that are normal and appropriate, and you're the one losing your cool and popping your cork and frustrated and whatever it is. But you still want to blame somebody instead of owning it. And so I appreciate that you said that because it gave me a chance to share my experience with it. And by the way, owning it didn't make it not happen, it happened. It still caused some embarrassment for some people in the family and things like that, that I then owned and apologized for. But now I'm hoping that in the future I'll respond more quickly. So I'm just giving you examples for you. Whatever it is you're struggling with, you're not going to do it perfectly at first. Be aware of it first, then start making changes, and hopefully you'll keep doing it better. Did that help? All right, good. Okay. Janet?
I just have one question, Rabbi, for verse 3. But whoring. So is that about adultery? Or is that about whoring with going other gods? What can you give us more about that term, please?
Okay, let's make whoring. That's a good question. Let's treat that as inappropriate relationships. How about making it that simple? In other words, going after other mighty ones, he would call whoring after other mighty ones. Going after people that you shouldn't be interacting with in that way in relationship could be considered whoring. That could be like a man with a woman, okay? So let's just talk about seeking after, pursuing inappropriate relationships, because that could cover all relationships, all right? All right, Eduardo.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi.
Shabbat Shalom.
I want to ask you about Ephesians 5:1, as far as imitating Elohim. So much in the Tanakh reveals, how we imitate Elohim, and a lot of it's humbling because reminds us of how we fall short of the glory of Elohim. I wanted to ask you about Jeremiah 9:24. If I was explaining to my kids how it is we imitate Elohim, would that be a good summary of that? It says, but let one who boasts boast in this, that he understands and knows me, for I am Yahweh, who exercises loving kindness, justice, and righteousness on earth. For in these things I delight.
Yes.
And are there any scriptures that come to mind that you would think would be good ways to summarize how we imitate Elohim?
No, that's a good one right there, Jeremiah 9:24. But the thing that, again, you would remind them is the connection between, here it talks about understanding and knowing. And the Psalm 111 verse I read you had to do with the wisdom. But the knowing and the understanding are in Proverbs, and they all connect back to fear of Yahweh, okay? So you would say, let him who boasts boast in this, that he fears me. And through fear, he has wisdom and understanding and knowledge of me. And that's how you can connect them all together, okay? Because the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding still starts off with the fear of Yahweh is the beginning of understanding, the beginning of knowledge, the beginning of wisdom, right? So that's where it's got to start. All right, Chris.
There were a couple things in Ephesians 4 and 5 that I found in a specific part of Isaiah, and then I realized I think that the whole section between those two parts in Isaiah was kind of connected. So, but the parts in Ephesians, so you were talking about the Spirit and Messiah and light and darkness and grieving the Spirit. And
wow, we covered a lot.
Yes, a lot of things. And waking up from sleeping and all that. So I was starting in Isaiah 59 and verse 1. Look, the hand of Yahweh has not become too short to save, nor his ear too heavy to hear, but your crookednesses have separated you from your Elohim, so not making kadosh, but being far away. And your sins have hidden his face from you from hearing, for your hands have been defiled with blood, and your fingers with crookedness. Your lips have spoken falsehood, so you're also talking about empty words. Yep. And how that could be. Yep. Your tongue mutters unrighteousness. No one calls for righteousness, and no one pleads for truth. They trust in emptiness and speak worthlessness. They conceive trouble and bring forth wickedness. And I'm going to just kind of skip around to where I want. So down to their thoughts are thoughts of wickedness in verse 7. 8, the way of peace that they have not known. There's not right ruling in their ways. Right. And they make crooked paths. Therefore, righteousness has been far from us, and righteousness does not reach us. We look for light, but there is darkness. For brightness, but we walk in thick darkness. So there's the light and dark. And then we feel for the wall like the blind, and we feel as without eyes. At noon we stumble as at twilight in deserted places like the dead. Right. So the dead again, and light and darkness. For our transgressions have increased before you, and our sins witness against us, for our transgressions are with us. And as for our crookednesses, we know them, transgressing and being untrue to Yahweh, and turning away from our Elohim, speaking oppression and apostasy, conceiving and pondering words of falsehood. Those are the empty words again. Yep. From the heart, and the right ruling is driven back, and righteousness stands far off. For truth has fallen in the street, and right is unable to enter. And the truth is lacking. Whoever turns away from the evil makes himself a prey. And in verse 16, there's no intercessor, so like Messiah, and his own arm saved for him, and his righteousness upheld him. And I'm trying to pick just the best ones.
Awesome.
And they shall fear the name of Yahweh from the west, and his esteem. So down 60 verse 1, it talks about the esteem. So when distress comes from the flood, and the spirit of Yahweh drives at it, and the Redeemer shall come, my spirit is upon you, in verse 21. Yep. The words. And then verse 60 chapter 60 verse 1 is actually in Ephesians. Slightly different though. It says the Messiah has shone on you, but it says for the light has come, the esteem of Yahweh has risen upon you. So Messiah being the esteem of Yahweh. For look, darkness covers the earth, and the darkness the peoples, but Yahweh rises over you, and his esteem is seen upon you. And verse 3 and 4 talking about looking and the brightness and being bright in verse 5 down. And then also in 19, no longer is the sun your light by day, nor will the moon give light to you for brightness, but Yahweh shall be to you an everlasting light, and Elohim your comeliness. 61:1, the Spirit of Master Yahweh is upon me, because Yahweh has anointed me to bring good news to the meek. There's just so much that keeps going.
Right.
And I wanted to get to one place. In 61, 62, and the nation shall see your righteousness, your sovereignty and esteem. For no longer you're called forsaken, and no longer is your land deserted. So that's like in Hosea 2 and Ephesians, all talking about not a people anymore, becoming a people.
Right.
And down to they shall be called in verse 12 the set apart people. So of course this teaching about set apartness, the redeemed of Yahweh, sought out, sitting out forsaken. And then lastly in 63, in verse, let's see, in verse 5 it talks about the arm saving again, and they are my people, children who do not act falsely anymore, and he became their savior. So Messiah again, the messenger of his presence. And then verse 10, but they rebelled and grieved his set-apart spirit. So you're talking about, at the very beginning of the teaching, grieving the set-apart spirit. And I don't know if that's actually Ruach HaKodesh, it's something similar, but that was also in Ephesians directly, grieving the spirit.
That's the same thing.
Yeah. And then I think I want to end with verse 14. As a beast goes down into the valley, and the Spirit of Yahweh causes him to rest, so you led your people to make a comely name. And then, I mean, you can even keep going in 63. So I know why you were dancing in the Arise and Shine dance today, and why, and then 64 verse 1, why Elder Billy was talking about that you would tear down the heavens and the mountains shake before you. So it was all connected today, I think, in today's Shabbat service and the teaching.
Amen. Amen. All right, thank you for that little mini sermon. Look, I'm a proud teacher, prophet, whatever, when I hear people like Chris, who've been with me since they were young teenagers, putting these things together, making those connections. And these are connections that clearly Shaul is aware of all these things as he's trying to talk to the congregation in Ephesus. These are things that he knew by heart. I mean, all of the prophets, etc., he knew. And so those connections are there for us to make those connections. I appreciate that. Of course, you did leave off verse 6 in chapter 62, where it says, I've set watchmen on your walls, which goes and matches with verse 11 of chapter 4 of Ephesians, because those 5 roles of ministry are there to have watchmen on the wall, O Jerusalem, all day and all night, continually who are not silent, okay? So, but good job. You covered a lot of things, and you actually skipped around. Very, very good job. Awesome. Okay, Shira.
Hallelujah. Thank you, Chris.
That was good.
Yeah, I love the connections. Thank you, Rabbi, for just hammering on us about being maximalists. I see, and I'm sure we all see, so many ways, so many complexities of hypocrisy that, I can see in me at times, justifying this or trying to hide that or whatever. And Father's really been working with me to just let go and listen to my words through your rabbi. And, the whole exercise of keeping track of how we spent our time for a whole 2 weeks, by day 12, I was kind of tired of it.
Look, you probably are 12 days ahead of a lot of people who didn't do more than one day, so.
Well, that's the whole thing. I mean, Father's showing me When Rabbi gives you an assignment, or he lays out a challenge, or he gives you a counsel in private, just do it. Just do it. And I'm really been praising Abba, reaping really great results from that. And so this season, the days of awe, for me are just really rich, so much different from last year. There are so many dumb things that I've done out of self-sovereignty that I couldn't expressly say they're listed in Torah restrictions. It's the fine-tuning. So when you talked about the strings of the heart, when Paul talks about, striking the strings of your heart, if you're playing a guitar and it's slightly out of tune, it's not nice.
No.
It's not nice. And so I think in my old habit of just, okay, I'm going to do the stuff. It says, keep Sabbath, all the mechanics. I'm going to do that. But to really come into the maximalist attitude, I've got to tune that guitar right on the money. I've got to tune every string in my heart. And I just want to share a verse that I've been using to help me grow in my use of time. And it's from 1 Corinthians 9 at the end. Paul says, "Do you not know that those who run in a race, indeed all run, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way as to obtain it. And those who compete control themselves in every way. Now they do it for a corruptible crown, but we for an incorruptible."
Amen.
"Therefore I run not with uncertainty. Thus I fight not as one who beats the air, but I treat my body severely and make it my slave, lest, having proclaimed to others, I myself might be rejected."
Amen.
And when I think of the grief of the Holy Spirit, I think of Father looking at me. If I'm starting to turn and head the opposite way, that grief of all that has been given, all that has been done, and watching me head toward losing my eternal destiny, that grief, I can't even live with 3 seconds of that grief anymore. And that's growth for me. And I say hallelujah and thank you, Rabbi.
Amen. Amen. All right, so I like the analogy about the heartstrings and being out of tune, but there is a challenge, okay? And the challenge is, as far as the heartstrings, the challenge is, what if you don't have an ear to hear they're out of tune? See, you have to ask Abba to give you the ear to hear, okay? Because I know some of you don't hear when someone misses a note and sings flat or sharp. Some of you, because you don't have the ear for that, right? So Shira is a musician, so she would, expect that she would hear something out of tune, and so it's a great analogy for her. But I like taking it that step further in that, what if your strings are out of tune, but you can't hear it? Because you don't have an ear for that. So pray that Abba will give you the ear so that you can hear, and you can develop it. I remember watching years ago, American Idol, and the people auditioning or singing, and somebody would sing and miss a note, and I'd be like, oof. And somebody that I was watching with would say, "Do you even know the song?" I said, "No." They said, "How do you know they missed?" I said, "Because it wasn't in the key in the where it was supposed to be in the music." And I have an ear for that. And that person over time we'd watch or we'd see it and go, "Did they just miss?" I go, "Yep." And they can now hear it. If you can train yourself to hear that stuff, okay? And so you want to ask Abba to help you train to hear if your heartstrings are out of tune. So that's a good analogy, Shira. I like it. All right, Shamash Steve.
All right, I found this here kind of made a connection if it would be a good connection to share. It said in 5:15, "See that you walk," and it said exactly, not as unwise, but wise. So how do we determine what is wise? If we go to Deuteronomy 10:13, because it says, to guard the commands which Yahweh and his laws I command you. So if we do that, then we're walking wise. If we're not, then we're not as wise.
Correct. All right. We got to get through these quickly, hopefully, so we leave some time for the live stream, because the live streamers are watching the clock going, he's not going to have any time for us. All right, Jennifer.
I'll try to be quick then.
That's okay.
I actually had a couple questions.
It's usually me that makes it long, so.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi.
Shabbat Shalom.
Today was really powerful. This has been really good walking through Ephesians. I feel like I've had a huge amount of understanding that I didn't realize how everything just connects, verse by verse. But I had a couple questions, as I kind of feel like a newbie still, because I'm just a couple years into the walk. When we were talking about the beloved child, and you were mentioning like Yeshua, when he was mikvah and he was, the Father says, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. There's a paradigm for me, because I was in the church for so long, that what I was always told is that the big deal about that moment was that he'd done nothing. He did nothing, and the Father's like, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. So I want to make sure that I understand the shift here. So when you were mentioning that earlier, were you saying that it was because of his obedience and him walking out Torah before that point that he was actually like in that moment called my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased?
Yes. Look, he didn't say this at his birth. He said this at his mikvah, okay? And so he's now 30 years old. And so he goes, this is my Son in whom I'm well pleased. He does everything I say. He does everything I desire. He puts my desire first. This is my beloved Son. That's why we are to imitate him, okay?
Okay, and that kind of leads into my next question, actually.
Okay.
Which was related to the imitating. Because I don't know why the beginning of this really hit me as just such a shift from what I learned my whole life in the church. But Paul talks about imitating a lot. But do we see that in the Torah? Do we see, like, say, for example, like, would it be like Moses and Joshua? Like where they're imitating the works of the last one, kind of?
Think of it more like Yeshua, when he called the apostles, he said, follow me. Okay, and when we do the follow the pattern teaching, the word there that's translated follow me has the idea of be in like manner as. In other words, imitate me. Do what I do. Do it the way I do it, with the approach that I have, with the heart behind it that I do. Okay, so it's not just follow me and like get in line and just go where I go. It means follow me, meaning in a behavioral imitation. Be in a manner like me. Behave like me, think like me, take the approach that I have towards things. So Paul's using the word imitate. Yeshua said follow. And then we take that back to the Tanakh, we're told obey. And we're not given the instruction so much of imitating and following, because there was the leadership in the body, in the land, with authority to say, this is what you do, walk in it, so to speak. And that, by the time you get to Yeshua, is a mess. So now Yeshua is trying to take some out of the mess and say, I'm taking you out of this mess, follow me. Do what I do. Learn to imitate my behaviors, my approaches, my thoughts, right? Let this mind be in you, Paul says. And so he uses the word imitate, or whatever the Greek would be there, or the Hebrew underneath. But he's trying to get the point across of the same thing Yeshua said when he said, follow me.
So when Yeshua came, he kind of was reestablishing the authority.
Well, he was trying to say, look, you guys are walking in a confused giant soup mess, and I'm trying to pull you out of that and have you now be a light and show what it looks like to do this correctly, not in the mixed sort of way. The Pharisees weren't wrong about everything, neither were the Sadducees, neither was anybody else necessarily that was at least trying to do some of this. He's saying, but they're doing it in such a way that it's creating a lot of empty words and confusion and issues and stumbling for people. So I'm going to train you correctly, and I want you to learn how to do this. Imitate me. I do it correctly, so do what I do, and you're going to be in good shape. If you have questions, ask, and I'll explain. And that's what he does in a lot of places. They come up to him, they say, Master, we don't understand what you're doing, what you're talking about. Please explain. Okay? How's that?
That's good. Okay, my last question is when it talks about how do you esteem, when it talks about esteeming others above yourself, for me, I'm kind of wondering, how do you esteem others above yourself without being a doormat? And I guess my second part to that would be, does that look like you kind of being who Abba created you to be and serving as that person? Does that make sense?
No.
All right.
Okay. No. All right. So I'm not saying it doesn't make sense, but okay. I'm going to give an answer that's I've never given. Okay. So let's understand, because I gave an answer the other night that was about esteem. Esteem is transferable. We'll call it honor. People don't know what esteem is. Honor. And so when he says honor somebody, in other words, give honor above seeking honor. So when he says honor someone above yourself, in other words, bestow honor to others as a higher priority than receiving it for yourself. Does that make more sense now? When he says esteem others above yourself, look to give honor more than you're looking to try to receive it. I think that's the first time I probably truly understood that verse. He just gave that to me just a second. I think it makes more sense than anything else. All right? Because otherwise it has to do with putting someone above you, or, well, I want, but I'll let you have what you want, or whatever. Then you say, well, how do you not be a doormat? I don't think it has anything to do with all that. It has to do with giving honor, because he uses the word esteem or honor there. Okay? So seek to give honor to others more than you're seeking to receive it for yourself. I think is more the answer there. Okay. Now you've asked 5 questions. That's enough.
I'm done.
All right, Frederick.
Is there any parallelism in thought between the verse 9, the last part, in goodness and righteousness and truth, and Yeshua's statement, I am the way, the truth, and the life?
Yeah, I'm sure that there's absolutely connection there. Look, in verse 9 it says, for the fruit of the Spirit is all goodness, righteousness, and truth. And Yeshua is the core, because it says none are good except the Father. And then, of course, Yeshua said, I only do everything that is the Father, so that's goodness there. We talk about righteousness. Well, he was complete in his obedience, so there's righteousness there. And then, of course, truth, he says, I am truth. So all of that is wrapped in here, plus in the rest of the verses when it compares darkness and light, and he says, I am the light. All of that's connected.
So it would be, to paraphrase that, to say that the reaping of the fullness of the intent is the way, the truth, and life.
Yes, I guess you could do that. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily make them a one word for word there, but I could be that way. I mean, I could certainly do that. Okay. All right, Maria.
Okay, so I have a question in Ephesians 5:14. And in bold words it says, wake up, you who sleep, and arise from the dead. But in little words it has Isaiah 26:19. And 26:19 says, let your dead live together with my dead body. So aren't we supposed to not have our dead live? Or?
Okay. Okay, so wherever you find those little words, I don't know where, is that in the ISR has that?
Yeah.
Mine doesn't have that, but I have the 98. That's why mine doesn't have that. Okay, so look, people that put footnotes, people that put little references in there, that's their guess and their way of trying to line up some verses to help you. That's not inspired from anywhere. It's not canon. It's not, okay? And so I don't think I can remember the last time I looked at the bottom of my scriptures to read a footnote. I forgot they were there. So that's why I'm looking now to make sure I don't have that. But the 98 version doesn't have that, okay? So when it comes to the footnotes, understand that this is whoever put the Bible version you have in front of you together was looking up other verses they felt were connected to what was being said. So whether it's in the Tanakh, they think it has to do with Messiah, they may put a reference back to Messiah in the Brit. If it's in the Brit and they think it references back to something in the prophets, they'll put a little reference back to that. And sometimes it does well, sometimes not so well. I don't think the Isaiah quote is really what's being talked about here, okay? So it was just something that they put in, the ISR people. But that was a good question because it reminded me that we've not really talked about things that are footnoted. And so, although we get a lot of people that will say, does this verse have to do with this one in Isaiah? And I'm wondering, where did you come up with that? Well, it was in the footnotes. And people would ask that question. I realized, because it was in the footnotes, and that's why they asked why it was connected. It's only connected because whoever put it together thought it was. And it may or may not be connected. I mean, it still may have been connected, but it's just because they thought so, okay? So if I was making my own translation, I may footnote something to reference something I think is connected. Like maybe, like what Frederick did, he was making footnotes, he may have referenced John 14:6 to reference that to Ephesians 5:9 and connect the two together, which was the way, the truth, and the life. And so he could have put a footnote if he was making a translation because he thinks they're connected, all right? All right, Rob?
I had a couple on 5:11. Sarah Groover says, verse 11 says to not have fellowship with those of darkness, but rather convict them. What does proper convicting look like? Is it walking it out as an example? And then this is from Shelley Bell. It says in 5:11, Rabbi, is this saying that we are to convict or let them know that they are walking or approaching fruitless works of darkness? Can you please expound for me?
All right, let's be careful that we're connecting the dots correctly. Okay, he says, have no fellowship with the fruitless works of darkness. So what are we talking about? People or works? We're talking about works. Now, the way you have fellowship is with the people doing the works. But what you're reproving is the works. So you have proven to yourself and convicted yourself that those works are wrong. It's not about you doing anything to the person doing the works. Okay, so that's where we can easily get messed up on context here. Okay, it says, have no fellowship with these works. Of course, that may mean that you need to avoid those people. But you're not reproving the people unless you have the role and relationship with those people where that would be appropriate. What you are doing is reproving in yourself, recognizing that's not good fruit. I don't need to be a part of that. Okay, does that help?
Okay, from Warrior Lion, says, please elaborate on Ephesians 5:5, unclean one. Would it be a correct understanding that this is referring to habitual unclean behavior from disobedience versus m.t.o.i, unclean, not from disobedience?
Okay, so we're guessing, because Paul doesn't tell us what he means by any of these things, right? So we talked about what whoring might mean. It says, nor an unclean one. So if he's talking about an unclean one, he could be talking about someone who is continuously in a state of m.t.o.i, where they're just doing things that render them unclean, all right? And there are things that you do that render you unclean that require certain things in order to restore back, and you can refuse to do those things. And that's where, again, this goes back to the next verse, which talks about the wrath coming on disobedience. So the uncleanness still has to do with disobedience. So it may not be just the disobedience that made you unclean, because maybe you did something innocuous that made you unclean. It's the disobedience to do what's necessary to make you clean again. So it could be either one of those, okay? All right, next question.
Okay, from Paula, is there any correlation between Ephesians 5:14 and let the dead bury their own dead?
No. Look, the let the dead bury their own dead is really talking about stop making excuses when Yeshua said, follow me, okay? And the gentleman responded, well, I got to go bury my father first. Well, his father wasn't dead, because if he was dead, Jewish culture puts you in the ground immediately, okay? And so it wouldn't be like he'd have to go travel to bury his father. What he was saying is, my father's old and dying, or will be dying sometime, and so I'm making excuses. I can't follow you now because I got something else that's important to do. I have a responsibility. And he's saying, let the dead bury the dead. And so there should be no thought, if you understand from Jewish culture, that, if he died, he would be in the ground within a day or two. Back then, probably the next day, like right away. Okay? Nowadays, we wait a little bit if we're waiting for someone to get a plane ticket that wants to come who's a family member and can't get there that fast. But it's as fast as they can do it, is the Jewish way of doing it. And this is a Jewish community. It was 2,000 years ago, but it still was a Jewish community. Okay? And those traditions have not changed. And so this here is talking about wake up, arise from the dead, is the context of chapter 2. When it talks about being dead in trespasses. So it's a state of being while still alive physically, but ultimately you're walking dead. All right, next.
Okay, from Laura, says, I'm applying for a job in sales. How can I work on commission without the quote unquote greed of gain?
By going back and listening to what I said, because you completely got it upside down and wrong. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be insulting when I say that. Greed of gain is not about making money. If you're seeking commission and you're selling something that is taking advantage of people and everything else, then you're selling the wrong product. Sell a product you believe in, and if you earn a commission for doing it, you're theoretically, okay? I was in sales forever, so I can speak very confidently on this. I only chose products that I believed would benefit the person if they bought it. And so they were going to get a value equal or greater than whatever they were paying, or I wouldn't sell it to them. So if you're selling something that you believe is worth at least, if not more, than what you're going to have them pay for it, and you get a commission on it, that's great. Now, if you're getting commission and you're getting people to buy things they really don't need just to get the commission, now you have greed of gain. Okay? So for example, when I was working years ago as a massage therapist, there were add-ons that we could add on to the thing. I could add on hot stones. I could add on some sort of a essential oil thing. These are all add-ons for extra money. And I always let the client know that they could do any of those things. But if I tried to talk them into it, that would be greed of gain, because they don't necessarily need any of those things, although they all were good for them if they wanted them. And I could tell them why it would be good for them. But if I was trying to push it, it's because I knew I got a commission on those, and I did. I got a nice commission on those. And people ask me, how come you sell more than anybody these things? I said, because I'm probably the only one of all of you that's not afraid to offer them and explain what they are. But I'm not selling them, but you're afraid because you think it's too much money that you wouldn't pay for these extra add-ons, so you don't offer it. And so if, for example, you're selling something that has to do with, let's say you're a heating and air person. Let's say that you're a plumber. Let's say that you're an electrician. Let's say you're an auto mechanic. I'm just saying this. And so you get a commission for the work that you're doing, and you talk the person into getting some things that they really don't need, but you get a commission on it. That would be greed of gain. You're doing it for you. So working on commission, the more people, if you're doing this right, and it's not greed of gain, the more people you help by getting them your product or service because it will bless them and help them and solve some problem for them, the more you deserve to get paid. Okay? But if you're doing it because it puts more money in your pocket to get them to do something, then you're greed of gain. You're approaching it wrong. Okay? So don't sell that product. So you only sell the product and you get the commission because it's the right product that meets the need of the person, and you're getting a commission to do it, which gives you the incentive to present it as the solution to their problem correctly. Salespeople don't sell products, they solve problems. They show you how their product or service solves a problem that you have. And so if a salesperson can convince me that their product will solve my problem, I'll probably buy it if it's at a reasonable price, right? And so, but if you're going to convince me for something I really don't need, but it might be nice to have, well, then because you want to put more money in your pocket, that's a whole different thing. Okay? That's a whole different thing. So it's one thing, for example, let's say you're working at McDonald's and you got a commission for selling fries with the thing. So you try to convince everybody to buy fries. It's different than just saying, by the way, do you want fries with that? Okay? Because that's what they're supposed to do. Say, hey, would you like a drink with that? Do you want fries with that? But if I try to convince you to get it because I'm going to make extra money on it, now I'm getting greed of gain. Because now it's about me. Okay? It's about me getting. So that's more greed of gain. So if I want to make a lot of money as a commission salesman, I'm just going to go out there and make a lot of sales. I'm going to have to just find enough people and sell them without trying to make so much off of each one because I'm trying to make money off of them. I want to provide them with something that I get paid to do. Hopefully that helped straighten that out. And if you don't feel that way about your product or service, you're selling the wrong thing. Okay? You are selling the wrong thing. You must believe in your product. I'll give you a quick story. I know it's already late, but so what? I won't buy from somebody that doesn't believe enough in their product to own it themselves. So I went to a car dealer one time to look for, I was interested in getting information about a Nissan something or other back, this is many years ago. And the guy didn't really do much to convince me about it. I said, what do you drive? And he was driving a Mazda. I said, tell me about that. I was convinced to buy his car. He didn't sell them though. He sold Nissans. See, if I was running the dealership, you'd be driving a Nissan, or you wouldn't be working there, because you need to believe in your product, all right? He couldn't sell me the Nissan. He could sell me the Mazda because he believed in the product. It was his product. It's what he bought. So whatever you believe in and you like and you think is great for other people, sell that. Don't just look at what pays well, because then you'll run into greedy gain problems potentially, okay? All right, Rob?
Okay, Nicole Davison, question, this teaching about empty words reminded me a lot of Deuteronomy 13 dealing with false prophets. Is this a proper comparison?
Sure, because the false prophets are giving you empty words that will lead you away from what you need to be doing. So you'll end up in disobedience. So yes, the false prophets spewing nothing but empty words. And coming across with authority, which is what we talked about. The empty words wouldn't have any effect if you didn't give that person authority and think they were a true prophet, for example, okay? Anything else?
No, the other ones are they're just asking some comparison verses, but.
Okay. Look, I apologize to the live streamers that sometimes I don't give you guys quite the time. There's a solution to that. Move. All right? Should there not be an advantage to being here? Especially, you can't complain either, because everybody moved here to be here, right? So you can't say, well, it's unfair, they have an advantage, they already lived in Cleveland. None of these people lived in Cleveland, okay? Except for John. Every time I say that, John raises his hand, okay? Other than John, none of you lived in Cleveland before you came here to be a part of this, okay? So I'm just saying I want to bless you guys with that attention and that extra time because you did move here to be a part of this so that you can stand up and ask questions, all right? All right, so with that, we're going to go ahead and close with the children here.